Now time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. And let's bring in our very own Arise analyst, the doctor of repute, Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Doc. How are you today?
Vimbai. Our very own Vimbai.
In
Good morning.
Abuja.
That's too much.
No, it's important. Early in the morning, you know, some people have coffee. I'm here to ginger you.
Okay. Thank you. I need that ginger. Huh? And good morning, Yolanda and Gwenga.
Good
Are you
morning.
ginger?
I was about saying you are the ginger itself.
The ginger and the tea. All right, okay. I hope you guys are doing great this morning.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so to begin the papers with us today, hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day. And in this day, we will be starting with a royal story. You know, the governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde, has approved Ladoja as the 44th Olubadan. Installation holds September 26th. Remember that the former Olubadan passed exactly 6 weeks ago at the ripe old age of 90. The incoming Olubadan, Rashid Ladoja, is a former governor of the state. What a journey to the throne for Ladoja, one he says has been laced with trials. Let me start with you, Benga. Can you share with us the significance of this impending change of the guard, if you will? You know, do you think our traditional institutions still hold weight in today's democratic setting, or should they have more relevance?
Yeah, if you recall, one of the things that the British colonial masters observed, especially in the southwestern region, was a well-established political system of governance, and that was why there was a semi-indirect rule in the first place in the western region, where there was an absolute indirect rule in the northern region, because especially the Ibadan, the Oyo Empire saw an established political system where there was even the system of checks and balances to start with. We have the king and we have the Oyomesi. That's the kingmakers that would now go in consultation to select who the next Oba is. So the same thing applies with the Olubadan. It has an established system where the selection process takes place, and it's it's clear cut. So the Oyomesi goes in, and we also have the Ogbonis. That's like the cults, not violent then, but those are the inner, what you can describe as the inner senate of the traditional Yoruba political system then. So Ladoja has been known as the heir apparent of Olubadan for several years now, and so it was so easy to watch the political transition and to see the beauty of the history of the Yoruba culture at play that saw the emergence of Olubadan as the new, as Rashid Ladoja, as the new Olubadan of Ibadan.
Yes, you know, he did say in his public speech that he went through that hierarchy in order to get here, and you know, it's been through a lot bumps, he said, but eventually he's going to be crowned. Let's take a second story in this day. The President Tinubu, who is attending the 9th International Conference on African Development in Japan, TICAD. The president, you know, says in this headline, salutes Nigerian military's momentum against insecurity. He spoke during a plenary on peace and stability. This, of course, is coming on the heels of those recent wins, you know, arrests of top terrorist kingpins in Nigeria and Chad. There's a related story in New Telegraph where the president made what could be termed a consequential statement at the same conference. So let's pull up a New Telegraph. TICAD 9, Tinubu demands 2 permanent UN Security Council seats for Africa, and Japanese PM pledges $5.5 billion for continent in collaboration with AFDB. President Tinubu demanded United Nations reforms with 2 permanent seats for Africa with full veto powers. And for the $5.5 billion pledge by Japan, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, will work with the African Development Bank for disbursement as a private sector investment. A lot coming out from that TICAD conference in Japan. Vimbai, Africa has for years pushed for reforms at the United Nations that would lead to fair representation for the continent. Africa deserves that seat. We know that. You can also comment on that reaction or recognition by President Tinubu of the military wins and, of course, the investment.
Absolutely. I think it's President Tinubu's speech in Yokohama yesterday was truly a statesmanly representation of it. It was a great diplomatic outing for him. I think he should be congratulated for that. Now, touching on issues surrounding Africa and the permanent seats, specifically 2 permanent seats that he's advocating for. Of course, like you've said, this has historically been a fight that Africans began. We know that United Nations was formed in the 1940s, and at that time most African, or actually all African countries were under colonialism.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a seat at the table,
yes.
so to speak. Over the years, Africa has gained independence. However, we haven't seen Africa represented, even though there are a number of treaties that have been passed, around a number of consensus, I believe 2, one in Eswatini, one in Libya, that were, in essence, continuing this advocacy for the permanent seats. We haven't seen it happen yet. We know that 54 out of the 193 members of the United Nations are African, and the United Nations Security Council specifically deliberates on African issues, Somalia, DRC Congo, even Sahel issues, which is why it's important that there must be a seat at the table. If we clamored for Zelensky to be in the room when issues pertaining to Ukraine were being discussed with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, then we must also clamor for African leaders to have a seat at the table when our own security issues are being addressed. I'm glad he also linked it to some of the security victories that we've had domestically, which is, again, an important message to send, and we continue to encourage our troops. But just to round up other aspects of the outing in TICAD, Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba, also struck the right chords when he spoke about the fact that, Japan has an aging population. So there's room for collaboration with Nigeria and Africa's young population, and also the fact that in Nigeria specifically, we're lacking our manufacturing sector. We've been talking about this industrialization, and he's saying Japan is ready to partner with that. Right. Other issues pertaining, as I round up, other issues pertaining, of course, with the unmanned booth, which was trending all over social media. There was that, what was supposed to be the Nigeria stand that had no decor, no decorations, no people manning it. The presidency have said that, well, it was never part of their plan. But I think for optics and just to ensure that we get as much as possible out of this outing, it would have been nice for there to even be some sort of a digital engagement, that someone could just go there, maybe type into some type of digital framework to get more information about doing business in Nigeria. All
right, a lot of substance coming out there from Japan. The Punch newspaper this morning, 2027 showdown. Wike Makinde Rift threatens higher stakes PDP convention. Indications add that the November National Convention of the People's Democratic Party scheduled for Ibadan, Oyo State may be derailed following a threat from Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. Wike is said to be opposed to the convention, while Governor of the state, Seyi Makinde, has his own issues. The party has issued a warning saying no individual should and can obstruct party activities. Actually, contrary to what the party says, individuals have acted bigger than the party and continue to do so. And interestingly, Seyi Makinde and Wike used to be allies, that formed the G5 governors during the last election in 2023. Now they're falling apart due to competing ambitions. Wenga, any thought on that?
Yeah, watching the PDP faced the toughest battle since its establishment in 1998. Founding fathers attempted to revive the party and bring it on the path of revival to reclaim its mandate. This was a party that once upon a time it had boasted it would rule, it would establish its political dominance for 60 years, but now things seem to be falling apart. And that is because its internal political mechanism is so weak. The other time, this battle could be traced to the prelude to 2023, when some members insisted on having an internal structure, an internal zoning formula that will be fair and equitable to all. But we saw what happened. So Wike now has been a force in the PDP and what I would describe as a bull in the China shop. So you just have to, he has been able to play so much of his political sophistry to hold the party at stake. And if you look at the recent controversy, most of it had gone in the way of Wike. So I think it's time for the people to bury their ego and have a seat, a sincere discussion on how to move the party forward. Otherwise, the party will be sold to the ruling party, or they would, or Wike might help them, eventually help them to crumble the party before 2027. It's a real delicate and very precarious situation for the PDP that needs a desperate and very urgent intervention by the party's founding fathers.
Let's stay with the punch, and Gwenga, I'm going to ask you to comment on this as well because you come from that part of the country. It's still royal issues. Royal Rao, Alafin may publish Supreme Court ruling after 48-hour ultimatum. We're seeing a dispute in royal circles there with Alafi of Oyo, Oba Akim Owade, preparing to release the Supreme Court ruling, which, according to the palace, affirms the Alafin's exclusive right to confer chieftaincy titles, covering the entire Yoruba land. The Alafi had issued a 48-hour ultimatum to the Oni of Ife, Oba Anito Ogunwusi, on some chieftaincy titles. The Alafian has accused the Oni of exceeding his authority and said Oni's powers were limited to the former Ramiya local government area, now split into Ife Central, Ife North, and Ife South. Benga, please bring us up to speed with what's actually going on between these two. We've known that there's a lot of history behind this, but very quickly, please.
Yeah,
I know it's a lot, but
it's like a PhD.
To start with, it's a misleading simplification to reduce the influence and the authority of the Ooni of Ife, which everyone knows as the custodian of the Yoruba spiritual heritage, to Ife Central and Ife South, and that's a gross misleading simplification. But be that as it may, this controversy is something that could be traced to the Yoruba historical heritage. It is a controversy of between an established system where one is like the chief priest of the Yoruba land. I recall that the Yorubas are deeply spiritual people. So the prominence given to the Ooni of Ife,
most Africans actually are deeply spiritual.
Yes, so the prominence given to the position of the Ooni of Ife is very, very influential and very prominent. But along the line, the Oyo Empire had dominated the political sphere in Yoruba land. You recall the era of Oyo dominance, where the Alafin of Oyo had wielded so much political influence, even down to the sphere of Dahomey in Benin Republic. And because of this influence, he has also wielded so much respect among the Yoruba hierarchy. So, but now, this calls for political maturity between the two. You can't really say this is what, because of the spiritual value we give to the Ooni of Ife and the roles he played. And you recall that the previous Ooni of Ife, before the Enito Ogunwusi, he had been a wealthy Oba. And you know, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So there's a bit of change in historical narrative down the line that we now see. But while one is like the political head, one is the spiritual head, and it calls for mutual balance and mutual respect between the two. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Gbenga. We'll have to move quickly to Daily Independent. Violations, FG shuts down over 13 million social media accounts. These accounts were closed down or deactivated due to offensive contents and other violations. This information was in a statement by the Director Corporate Communications and Media Relations Department, National Information Technology Development Agency, Mrs. Hadiza Omar. Apparently, there's a Code of Practice 2024 issued jointly by the Nigerian Communications Commission, National Broadcasting Commission, and NITDA that outlines guidelines for online safety and managing harmful content. Yolanda, let me bring you in here. There are different sides to this matter, those for and against regulating social media. There's definitely pros and cons, and other countries struggle with this. Also, especially in instances where social media is highly toxic and produces tension that affect social cohesion. Look what's happening in Nigeria, in Lagos, for instance.
You know, Dr. Constance, this report is very interesting because it comes around the time where the U.S. restrictions have been enforced concerning social media usage. So I don't know if this is the FG also trying to tighten its belt to make sure that people are falling in the right lines. This does fall in a very precarious situation in that freedom of expression, where do we draw the line when it comes to what you can say and what you can do? But I think, for speaking generally, it's a positive and a good change that the 13.5 million accounts have been shut down. There's so many things to look at. People are often harassed online. Things are published that are not meant to. So I mean, I think this is a good thing. The public response we can only see as we go forward. But it may also provoke people to, you know, complain about what their rights are when they're, you know, what they're allowed to say and what they're allowed to do on social media. It's a mixed bowl of reactions, if I can say so.
Yeah.
Just one sentence, Dr. Constance, well, two sentences. So the Code of Practice itself was introduced in 2022, and the foundation for what is considered harmful content is based off of the Cybercrime Act 2015 and the Child's Right Act. I think the Child's Right Act is self-explanatory. The Cybercrime Act, we all know, has been a source of controversy because people feel it's being used for censoring and for bullying and for political muscling. So this is concerning in that we haven't resolved outstanding issues concerning the Cybercrime Act. So we hope that this code of practice will not be used, this compliance will not be used to shut down voices of dissent in the spirit of information, misinformation, because they're saying some of the accounts that were shut down because of information shared during the 2023 elections as well. That's addressed in this report.
And offensive comment. You also know, Bivimbai, that there are so many fake accounts.
Very true.
Especially when it comes to politics. People just generate fake accounts in order to fight political opponents. And what's going on in Nigerian social media space is crazy. But like we have all noted, there is a pros and cons. You know, there is a fine line between regulating social media to make sure that it's clean and, you know, stamping down on political opponents. Let's quickly take Vanguard newspaper. Anger over planned pay rise for political office holders. Khan says it's wicked. ACF sees the plan as provocative, and ADC asks federal government to suspend such increment. Is this misplaced priority? Majority of Nigerians live below the poverty line and are also suffering from stagnant wages over the years. So the economic hardship is across the board. Anyone can jump in here very quickly.
Okay, when you look at this situation, it's a bit complex, but we need to understand how institutions work in Nigeria. The Revenue Mobilization and Allocation and Fiscal Commission, RUMFAC, is constitutionally, statutorily empowered to review political appointees' remuneration for a regulated period of time, while the Wages and Salary Commissions are responsible to regulate the salaries, to review the salaries of the public servants. So now, in a situation where the remuneration scale had not been reviewed for over close to 15 years, you would know that the institution responsible now has a mandate to look at the anomalies of the situation and correct the irregularities. So that's what is really happening now, because RUMFAC had to step up to a statutory mandate to look at this thing. In a situation where the Director of Petroleum Resources earns more than the President, you cannot begin to question this. But I know it's insensitive. We have the sentiment on the cost of governance too. That is the prevailing sentiment that we need to consider. But I'm just trying to say that the RUMFAC has a role to play in functioning and in performing its constitutional mandate.
If we could wait for 15 years, we could wait for a couple more years. Right now, austerity is what we need. You know, austerity is supposed
to be. But we also need to call on the Wages and Salary Commission to also step up on its role to review the salaries of the public servants too. Because if it's docile, it's not, the burden is not on the RUMFAC to play the role of the Wages and Salary Commission.
All right, there's enough time for debate outside of this paper review. Let's continue, because we have limited time. The Guardian newspaper, let's see what's there. Road tax scheme stall after delivering 2.6 trillion naira projects. And in true Guardian fashion, there's an illustration on that front page to further explain that report. And 7,000 Nigerians stranded in Libya, NIDCOM reveals. For those thinking of traveling through the desert, to Europe, you might just die. NIDCOM says, it said it's not advisable. Plus, over 70,000 irregular Nigerian migrants have been returned to the country this year. Then Leadership newspaper, FG Housing Estates rot away in Nasarawa 4 years after inauguration. We also have Daily Sun this morning. Outrage trails planned pay rise for Tinubu others. How bandits killed 50 in my constituency, according to this lawmaker. And Furious Soludo ban. International headlines, Daily Graphic. Japan eyes Ghana for big investments. This is coming on the heels of that TICAD conference. More than 100 Japanese companies have expressed interest to invest in that country. There's also The Citizen. Clouds over settled jobs. New Minister of Higher Education is in its appointment. So his appointments in SA are being implicated in fraud and mismanagement, and he's been asked to choose new candidates. And a top story in the UK, is still on the migrant hotel crisis, where the court ruled the hotels have to be shut down. The latest seems to be a revolt. So let's see Daily Mail. Labor revolution on migrant hotels after a shock Epping court ruling, and then, it leaves the left, defying Prime Minister Keir Starmer. That story also features in Daily Mirror, a voice for the voiceless. So we don't want to live like this, says a refugee who was brutalized by Somali terrorists. So it's an evolving story. There are so many sides to it, and people are, split down the middle, Yolanda.
Oh, yes, I think we've been talking about this for a while, Dr. Constance, and there's no running away from the fact that this is a hard thing to take, I believe, for the Brits, because if you have all these migrants coming in and overrunning all these hotels, it will be provocative to the people. We had a similar situation in Spain as well, but that one was a little more violent because they were taking to the streets to literally say that we don't want these people in our country. But those were not migrants, those were tourists. But the point is that we really have to manage how we handle such situations. Clearly, there's a humanitarian crisis around the world where so many countries are, to blame, because it's our countries that people are coming from and looking for a better place. Just as you had spoken about Libya and Nigerians trying to leave, and you had said that it was actually said that we could die in the desert. So this all adds up to the bigger picture, where migration is really a top issue, and it has a humanitarian crisis that is straining other civilized societies.
All right. The Guardian newspaper, if we can pull up The Guardian, Israel says it will expand Gaza City offensive. And finally, no time to discuss that, finally to the Daily Telegraph, state has failed white working pupils. Education Secretary appalled at English and math standards of GCSE results. She says 4/5 of children from working class are falling short. What a report we have there about what's happening in current United Kingdom. We have to leave it there. That's all we can take on the paper review this morning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that robust tour around the front pages of newspapers from home and abroad, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Well, that's all we have time for here on Daybreak today. I'm Vimbai Mutiniri Ekbeyong.
And I'm Gbenga Ashiru.
It's goodbye from me. I'm Yolanda Robert. The morning show is next. You stay tuned. Bye.